You are listening to the Thinking Effect podcast with Ortal Green and Lili-Ann Kriegler.
Hello and welcome to episode 35 of the Thinking Effect podcast with Ortal Green and Lili-Ann Kriegler. And of course, Ortal Green is not here tonight. We have a wonderful guest tonight, Andrea Sherburn, and she is talking tonight about how the role of art educator can enhance student learning. And I'm going to stop there and do it all again. Andrea, is it Sherburn?
Sherburn, B-U-R-N, Sherburn.
And I'm not going to talk about Ortal because she's not here. Okay, we'll start again.
You can, because the people are normally used to her being there.
Yeah, no, the thing is, it tells us that at the beginning in the music, so it's fine. I won't do that.
Okay.
All right. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Hello and welcome everyone to episode 35 of the Thinking Effect podcast. Tonight we're talking about how the role of the art educator can enhance the learning for students. And I have a very special guest, Andrea Sherburn. Hello, Andrea.
Hello, it's lovely to be with you, Lili-Ann.
It's so lovely to have you on the program. And we've had a long association, Andrea. We met each other many years ago working together at the beautiful Fintona Girls' School.
Yes. And then, of course, through professional learning networks as well, through Independent Schools Victoria, and also through the Reggio Emilia Australia Information Exchange Group as well.
Exactly, and I want to get into all of those topics. But I'd like you to introduce yourself to our listeners so that they know all about what you do from day to day.
Excellent. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Andrea Sherburn, and I've worked in pre-primary and primary education in Melbourne, in Australia, for the past 35 years, with a lovely sojourn in 2003 and 4 to teach kindergarten and junior high school children English in Japan. Initially, when I left school, I studied a Bachelor of Arts at Monash Uni, and I was majoring in the theory of art, in visual arts. And after those 3 years, I'd worked during that time in children's holiday programs and realised I had an absolute passion for working with children. And so I moved on straight away to do my Bachelor of Arts. And after that, I was ready to be a teacher and commenced what now, as I said, has been 35 years. So I've taught in a range of different contexts. I've been a classroom teacher, I've been a curriculum lead, I've been a head of junior school, I've worked across all curriculum areas, but my absolute passion is teaching art. And the thing I'd like to say is you don't actually have to be an art teacher to teach art and bring out the best benefits for your children in their learning. So please don't switch off if you think, oh, this is just for art teachers. It's not. And it's for parents as well. We can all encourage children to be quite extraordinary. They are exceptional artists. They believe they are artists, and they are convinced that, you know, they can be creative. They have no doubt in their capacity, being creative, being artistic. And it's really not till they're probably maybe about 8 is the point at which when they need to represent their drawings and can feel a little bit cautious about, oh, it doesn't look as I want it to. Up until that age, they just make and create, and that's the absolute joy of it.
Just a little bit about I agree with you, Andrea. I mean, I, as you know, have spent a lot of time in early childhood classrooms, and they just do it with a sense of flow. Yeah. And I think it's only when someone starts to judge or evaluate their drawing in accordance with some sort of external expectation, yes, that they might develop some kind of hesitancy, yes, around it.
Yeah, no, children love art and love being creative. And to that extent, if you ever do get to be an art teacher, it's like being a rock star. So be prepared for that. It's a delight. Just some things about myself. I grew up immersed in music. My father was very involved in trad jazz, both as a pianist and a musician. And music continues to surround me as my husband is a blues harmonica player. And I have a great passion for gardening and for cooking. Both of these started in my childhood with the encouragement of my grandparents. And that again links back to that being creative and artistic, often very encouraged by grandparents and children. Got a love of sport as well. Played a lot of hockey, graduated into golf, which Lili-Ann and I both enjoy. Love swimming, love snorkeling. And I also have a delight in travel. And I think travel is an incredibly rich opportunity to learn about other cultures and to observe their arts. And I collect textiles when I'm travelling, and probably ceramics as well. So lots of interest. I've worked over the past 20 years with a philosophy or pedagogy of teaching, which comes from Reggio Emilia in Italy. And they believe that every child is infinitely capable and can express themselves through at least 100 different languages. And when I say a language, I don't mean that they're fluent in English, French, and Italian. Think about the language that you express yourself when you sing or if you play a musical instrument. Think about the language you might use when you perform or you dance. Think about the languages you use when you compose or write. And think about the languages of expression that we use, every day in so many ways. It's our role and it's our responsibility as educators to enable children to connect with those languages, to experience a huge range of materials and experiences, and encourage in every child their capacity. And the child may not know or may even be resistant to a particular material or experience, and that's our role, is to nurture that and support them and guide and encourage them. The Reggio Emilia group in Australia is based in Melbourne, so I've been very lucky to do a lot of professional learning with them. But the greatest highlight of all was when I finally got to go to Reggio Emilia myself. And I went with a number of colleagues from my school at the time, which made it a very, very rich learning experience because we could encourage in each other. And it was the first time that Reggio Emilia in Italy had invited a foreign group of delegates, we were Australians, to go and train as Atelieristas. Now that just means in Italian, the person who's in charge of the practice of art. And in each of their learning centres, they have an Atelierista or someone in charge of art, and a pedagogista who's in charge of the pedagogy or theory of learning. Well, coming back, I knew what my passion was, to complete my career as an art educator. And the reason is, and it shouldn't be surprising to you, but it's possibly art is the most transdisciplinary learning you can do. Disciplinary means, like, if you think about subjects like English or science, all of that is taught through art. Mathematics, problem solving, technology, all of those come into the teaching of art. Then, of course, you've got your cultural references to artists. You've also got the learning of fine and gross motor skills, particularly for children, fine motor skills, learning to control a pen or a pencil, learning to be able to tie a knot in string, learning to be able to manipulate clay. All of those skills are so important. And then on top of that is the self-esteem and the self-confidence and the resilience that through art we can encourage in children. So I think it's the ultimate role that you can have in a school. Also, you get a good budget, and so that helps too. You can buy lots of lovely things for the children to make with. So I've been very, very lucky to gain employment at a school called Lowther Hall. Lowther Hall is also an all-girls school. We start with kindergarten 4-year-olds, then we move through to having children in prep right through to year 12. And in fact, today I've just been setting up our school's art exhibition for kindergarten to year 12. And we have one piece of art for every individual student and some collaborative pieces as well. So,
yeah, you were telling me how many of those drawing pens or whatever you call them that you pushed into walls today. How many? You counted them, Andrea.
Well, a professional installer comes in and puts all the screens in that we display the children's artwork on. But yes, 90 artworks with a minimum of 3 long T-pins. That's 270 pins. These little fingers are a little bit sore and bruised this evening. But I can't wait for the children and families to come to the opening.
Yeah, well, it takes all the skills to put on an exhibition. Yeah, so I mean, the Atelierista role for me is a revolutionary one, and in fact, the progenitor of the Reggio Emilia philosophy, Malaguzzi, there were 2 absolutely revolutionary things, and the one was that he wanted for the first time ever to really understand what children were thinking. So making their thinking visible was really important to him. And then how children make their thinking and how they express their emotion, their thoughts, is often not verbally or in what we understand as verbal methodologies like reading and writing and talking, but in movement and in, as you mentioned, all those other amazing languages. And so when he brought the Atelieristas in, it wasn't so much to learn to draw, as a lot of people might think is the, although I think we do have a more expanded sense of what an art teacher is, but it was more to draw to learn, or to draw to think, or to use those languages to express your knowledge and your understanding of the world around you. And you've expressed how beautifully children just take to it like a fish to water.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think too that a comment that you just made, learning to draw or drawing to learn, it's a cycle. And it's our role to encourage children to, of course, draw from imagination and draw to be creative. But there's also that opportunity to draw and to observe. And that's really the focus of what I'd love to talk with you, Lili-Ann, is my passion for how do we support children to learn, to observe, and to look carefully, and then to represent what they're seeing. And I think that's just such an essential skill we can give children. They must have times where they just draw creatively and they draw to use colour. And it's really interesting with the youngest children. They often don't care what the colour is initially. It's probably around the age of about 5, maybe 4, where the colour becomes important, that it represents the colour it is. Prior to that, they really don't mind whether it's a grey lead pencil or a black fine liner. And certainly with Reggio, that's something that is important, that children don't use large pieces of paper and they have multiple occasions to observe and to draw, that we give them either a 2B or a dark grey lead pencil or a black fine liner pen to show what they know about what they're drawing. The colour is then layered on after, and prior to colour, we'll often have the opportunity nowadays to take a photo, to scan, or to photocopy the children's initial drawings. And I think, Lili-Ann, you and I were discussing about the portfolios and how wonderful it is if we can keep these little collections from their first interest. It might be in a sunflower, they've been out in the garden and they've quickly drawn their sunflower. But then the sunflowers, as the seeds develop and the birds come to feed from it, they become more interested and they start to look more carefully. And if you look back at those drawings over time, you see they're noticing and they're wonderings and what are they more aware of now about that sunflower? And
yes, I call it a layering.
Yes.
And so, in some situations, and not all, and honestly, we don't make judgments about this, but occasionally, the child will have one go and then that will be seen as the final work. Whereas I think what you're saying is that it really is just an entry point. And then, depending on what the children see and observe and what interests them, you can go deeper and broader and connect it to other elements of learning.
Another aspect that's very interesting with the development of these young children too, from say particularly 3 through to maybe 6 or 7, which is my specialty area, is you see them go from where things are drawn not to our scale, but to the scale of importance of the child. So sometimes their drawing of themselves is very, very big, but mummy and daddy are actually quite small. Vice versa, you might see they've drawn their dog is enormous because they love their dog. They are enormous, but then other members of the family are small. And it's not a relative scale to what we see or what they would know, that dad is far taller than them. But I love that. Sometimes they have great big love hearts in their bodies, and that's because they're filled with love. And I think opportunities to have materials arranged in a very aesthetic way, a space to be able to draw and to learn, We like to have their art materials beautifully arranged and accessible. My school has actually got an art space in each classroom, one in the kindergarten, one in the prep and the year one, and that was part of our design. So the children, not only when they're working with me doing art in the atelier or the art space, they know that they can go to that at any time in their learning and use those materials that they've learnt to use with me and use them, and they're theirs to use. One of my fondest memories of my childhood was I always had a making space. I was very lucky with nice art materials, but lots of bits and pieces that were leftovers and, boxes and lots of sticky tape. That sort of free exploration is so important for children. But coming back to the importance with drawing, I find that it's really helpful with children if we're doing observational drawing. This might be of flowers, it might be of mushrooms, say a strawberry that's growing in our garden. And I get the children to physically touch and trace around the elements that they want to draw. I think that does help them with scale and proportion. I get them to observe carefully. We sometimes use a magnifying glass. And I also have a digital microscope, and that may sound very exotic, but to be honest, they're down to less than 100 Australian dollars. Just plugs into your laptop, and their excitement to look, and a conversation Lili-Ann and I had about the layers of looking, from the real life, real world, right through to that microscopic, and their fascination for that is wonderful. And again, these can be different aspects of what they might be drawing as well.
Yes, it's almost as though they go into an alien world, once you go right deep, say, into your sunflower or anything that they look at. And, it is a real border crossing between what's visible and what's not, and really gets them to wonder and think about, how the planet's been put together. It's really yes. That sense of awe and wonder is what it is
delightful. And we often record or write down their thinking as they talk, and we can give them feedback and feed that back to them. Not necessarily straight away, but maybe the next day or when we come back to drawing again. I think that's a wonderful thing. I was just going to have a little bit of a laugh with you about the microscope. The digital microscope can be held to any angles, and we sometimes look at our skin, but I tell you, they can't resist looking up their nose and in their ear. It's fascinating. Even I was interested in that.
So, yeah, again, it should be a very, very alien world in there.
But yes, I think, as I said before, it's not just teachers that can be helping children with experiences of a range of art materials. It's parents, it's grandparents, it's a nanny or a babysitter. We can all play a role. And taking children out into nature, what do they delight in? What do they notice? I was talking about the strawberries with you, Lili-Ann, when we were planning our chat today, and we found this most beautiful image on the internet, which showed the 21-day life cycle of a strawberry, from where it started as a flower, the bee had pollinated it, and slowly, and they'd arranged the growing strawberries around in this 21-day cycle. And the children were fascinated by that, as they had observed already each day running out to the strawberries they'd planted to see how they changed. And how long do we have to wait till it's red and we can eat it? So there's so many opportunities where children engage with nature, engage with the world and the materials within it, and want to draw and express their understanding. And I think if we give them these opportunities to look deeply, to look with interest, and to draw and record that, it doesn't have to be in a journal. You might keep a portfolio, but you just see their development, particularly obvious in their drawings and representation of humans as well. And that's showing more detail. I love it when they first show the fingers, 2 fingers, then eventually you get 3, and then slowly but surely you'll get the 5.
Yes.
I think that's fascinating. The other thing I love is when they draw 1 line for an arm and 1 line for a leg, and I get them to feel your arm, there's the outside here and the inside, feel your leg, the outside and the inside. So you're going to need to use 2 lines, and that makes a fantastic difference in, you can move them to the next phase and stage of drawing.
Yes. Now, Andrea, with your role, you've really moved away from being a single classroom teacher all the time. And I think, in the world of schools and the world of education, this puts you in a really interesting situation. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your role and how, working with other teachers, how you think that benefits the children and how you think art enriches some of the other curriculum areas that the children are working on.
So every day I have an hour with each classroom to do art, whether that be through their inquiries, through literacy or through numeracy. And I also get 1 hour where I get to prepare my resources, do my planning, do my documentation. And each team that I work with, prep and kindergarten, prep and year one, we have meetings each week too, where we look at the children's learning, we discuss what we've noticed in their conversations, and we have that input of a team where I've noticed strengths, maybe through the art materials they've used that the teachers haven't seen, or I've noticed a perseverance or a particular mode of learning that the other teachers haven't had a chance to observe. So we truly collaborate together as co-educators. And then I'll give feedback too about other art materials or an art experience that might really suit the children. And sometimes I'll take a little group of children. We noticed after these 2 years during COVID, the children have maybe at home where the family didn't want things to be messy. They've had limited experience with clay or even Play-Dohs and plasticines. Some have had very little experience with paint, and even some came to 4-year-old kinder having really not used scissors very much. So very different to previous in my experience in teaching, very different cohort. And so my role with my colleagues is to provide the richest learning environment we can for children. And those who have capacity to show through art their understanding of the worlds, they may not be the fast readers, they may not be the confident writers, but they can act, or they can draw, or they can model. And it's such a joy and something we value. And it's also about how you present their learning. We have a celebration of learning every term where we take their learning or things that they've constructed, whether individually or collaboratively, that's presented and shared with the parents from the whole team. We document each week with photographs and quotes from the children, the learning that's been happening. So there's a very strong bond and connection between the parents and ourselves for the experiences that the children have had. And that documentation, as you know, just so beautiful over the year to see it build and the interests and inquiries that the children have. So yes, it's a very privileged role that I have to work with all of the teachers and all of the students every day. And as I said a bit before, the art teacher's a bit like a rock star when I come into the room to learn with the children and facilitate their learning. They're going, are we coming to the art space today? And sometimes maybe the whole class will be engaged in an artistic process or a creative process. Sometimes it's just a small group of 2. If it's a very challenging school, maybe 4, 6 or 8 children that have time with me in the art space. But it's fairly and equitably distributed over time. Otherwise, the same 4 or 5 would be the first to rush in and sit down.
Well, I mean, it is a really, really special thing. And I love how you mentioned, the skills maybe with the scissors and the paint and the drawing, etc. There has been in the past quite a push, often from parents, quite a big pressure to get their children to read and write really early. And they possibly don't realize how important some of these other skills are. They underpin. You can't really use the fine liner until you're using your gross motor, etc. But also just having that rich conversation is, if you're just asking a child to write what they know, they're very limited early on in what they
Yes.
can write. But if you're lending them the skill, and in Reggio Emilia they do a lot of that, they lend the skills. So
Yes.
you lend the skills of your ability to write so that they can contribute at the absolute richest of their thinking. So rather than we went to the lake, whatever, we spent the weekend fishing with Dad, and when we got there we found this pile of abalone shells and someone had hauled them out, and that's illegal, it's not really allowed. We were really upset, and then we went home, but we had fish and chips.
Yeah.
So it's just they're talking about
So much richer.
sustainability, the ecosystem, their experiences, where they went geographically. And if we limit them, and we don't give them these abilities to express it in drawing or in acting or in talking, we can really restrict how much they're learning. And I think getting them to draw in things like mathematics, etc., taking those abstract ideas and setting them out in ways that are evident to the people that they're communicating with, just makes it really easy for them to talk about it and shows their understanding in a way that sometimes they might not be able to express. So I can understand that you sometimes see different things from what other educators will see, and they might see different things than you see, but it just gives everyone a go to show the strength in how they express their learning and their knowledge.
One of the keys is in your questioning and your conversation. It doesn't have to have an immediate that the drawing is happening, but soon after. And I recently had a child, I just observed her drawing and asked a few questions. She was a 4-year-old in kinder, and she actually ended up showing the entire water cycle. So from how rain then goes up into the clouds, how rain comes from the clouds down, forms the rivers and the creeks, and that flows down to the sea, and then out at sea how the hot sun shines and the water comes up as little drops. It was incredible. And so allowing children time to record and draw, allowing children time to have rich conversations and wonderings is so enriching. And we know that they have to have a strong oral or spoken vocabulary before they will have a read or written one. Don't race to read and write. Give them lots and lots of time to create and make an experience.
Yes, that language that they're absorbing, the receptive language, is really quite easy. They can follow it, but to articulate their learning, those concepts have to have landed really well. And discussing it in context in the way that you're doing, that really reinforces the meaning of words. And so the art is helping them, in a sense, to articulate it in the way that they express it, but then they're also learning this very rich vocabulary. And what I liked about your example with the water cycle is that understanding of the connection between the different parts and why they happen, because there's not only just the water cycle itself, but it's why it's happening. The temperature changes, the states, the actual, what is the matter? The matter is air, or the matter is liquid, or the matter might be ice. So the differences between those things, the ability to compare them, there's so much deep thinking in that. And I mean, your science teacher and your whatever they call it these days in schools must be delighted when a child can come up and be able to explain something as complex, as the water cycle.
I think too, the development of significant information text that's very visual, sometimes just with simple labelled diagrams and simple text, has really opened up some fantastic learning for very young children. And these books are so rich in learning. I had the privilege yesterday of taking a group of children to the Melbourne Museum, and we had an immersive digital experience, which I highly recommend at the museum, which is based on Indigenous perspective of how animals use their senses to communicate. and we need to be guardians to care for country and care for animals. Anyhow, during this immersive experience, the children were interacting with, as it was, moths, bats, fish, and then whales. And the quality of some of the conversations I had with those children, I took quite a bit of video and they viewed that this morning in the classroom. And we then wrote poetry about the experience. Now, this is grade 1 children, but wow, that rich, dramatic, digital, visual, multi-sensory experience was such a provocation, and you would not have had the same creativity and expression without that incredible experience.
Yes, that's it. That word provocation is very, very important, again, in that Reggio Emilia philosophy, in that, you know, you're allowing children to confront something that is, in a sense, appealing to the senses. It might shock the senses, it might, but it always raises interest. And, you know, that same experience, though, I can imagine if you took year 9, 10, 11 or 12 students or tertiary students or adults into it, it would be equally provocative. Because, you know, we're wired to respond to motion and sound and movement and dance. And yet it's some of the stuff that we switch off, or we compartmentalize it in our education system. And so that's why I was so excited to be talking to you today, because it's something that then flows through the whole curriculum, and it flows up all the way through the school, because once the children have got it, they are always going to have that ability to express themselves using those different languages, because their brains are switched onto it very early. Wherein, you know, in sometimes, as Sir Ken Robinson says, that schools actually destroy rather than develop creativity.
And whilst we can access through digital media zoo information about zoos, animals, plants, etc., nothing beats a real experience. And we really notice this after school holidays. The children who've had, yes, a lovely holiday, but maybe, and they've had an emotional engagement being at the beach with family, those sorts of things. But the ones that have been with a grandparent or a family member to the museum, to the zoo, and maybe followed up with interest, maybe a video that about the same topic, those children with those rich conversations, rich immersive learning experiences, it changes those children. It takes their thinking to a different level.
Yeah, so we have a colleague in common, Dr. Kathleen Buchanan.
Yeah.
And she used to say exactly that, you know, create a child into an expert. Because what will happen is, you know, they will then be spending their time trying to follow their interest, and they become really amazing learners. And so she used to take children off to the library. I mean, she was a drama teacher, so doing lots and lots of these languages every single day.
Yes, yes. And I think affirming too to the child, they are a scientist, they are an inquirer, they are a researcher. They are a gardener. They, you know, you are an artist. You are a creative. That's so important to reinforce a positive self-esteem about those range of roles and range of languages that they have.
Yes, because we don't decide for them what they are. And, you know, really, really early, I used to think, because in Reggio Emilia, they say, you know, children have all these questions. And I'm like, what? I mean, this child is 18 months or this child is 2 years old. How are they going to have questions? But they do, because they pick up things and they take a leaf and they put it into a bowl of water and they're checking out what is happening, you know, or they're touching things, or so their questioning is sensory. And you know, there have been some of the most remarkable observations of babies in those centres, and how they are exactly what you're saying. They're scientists, they're biologists, they are, you know, artists. as early on as in their toddlerhood. It is just incredible. And imagine if it's so rich for them, how would it be if we allowed our older students to have this incredible freedom? Because these days you can publish anything. You know, as we were talking, digital media, now writing, publishing, videography, podcasting, 3D.
The children create some amazing videos and recordings. Being able to record their voices and conversations as well is so rich.
So
they're very lucky.
Yeah, it really does offer us many, many opportunities. Now, Andrea, is there anything you wanted to add to before we go into summary mode? There's always something my interviewees want to add or say.
The one thing I probably haven't spoken about is it's important that you are a risk taker too as an adult modelling to children. You know, sit alongside them and draw, compliment what they've done well and say, oh, could you show me how to do that? And vice versa. I think you need to be willing to learn as well and learn alongside and really draw on that rich language that comes from the icky, sticky clay and the materials that you're using. It's just so exciting. Take the time. It may only be 5, 10, 15 minutes to sit together and share. It's so important.
I totally agree with you, that risk-taking. And sometimes teachers feel like because I can't do it, I can't offer it. But that's when, you know, you could get an expert in, and we've done that in the past, where you might bring an artist in, or we used to have a professional photographer come in occasionally, because then they can lend their skills and never feel limited. There's always someone out there who can take your children on this journey.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So we'll go into just a brief summary. We've had Andrea here today, who is an art educator or an Atelierista, working not only in her own classroom, but with all of the other classroom teachers in their own subjects, and working with children to express their knowledge through art and to learn. And as we say, not really by learning to draw, but by drawing in order to learn. And when we say drawing, we really mean any kind of expression, including puppetry or art or, you know, whatever it might be. Why it's important is that it really engages all the senses and the total capacity of the brain. It also gives children the opportunity to shine, where if they're only given a few ways to express themselves, they may never learn to know themselves, and others might never know them. And how we do it is in some of the ways that Andrea's mentioned, is to offer them these incredible rich experiences in nature, to take them out on excursions, to lend them the skills so that they can use the clay and use it in a way that it is successful, the clay, the paint, you know, and then it's this deep, deep respect for what the children are creating. And when I say children, I mean the children of the planet. It's everyone. It's the babies, the toddlers, the preschoolers, the junior school, tweens and teens, and the adults, and the grandmas, and the grandpas. We are all able to express ourselves in this way. And it's been such a joy, Andrea, to talk to you about it. Your passion just shines through. You know, and I know you could probably carry on talking about it for another half an hour today. So is there any message for our listeners? What idea do you want to leave them with today?
I think believe in the young, believe in their capacity, encourage their capacity through ways of it. You know, it's not costly to take them outside, to spend quality time listening and talking and making and doing, and you will make them a much greater person for the future.
Fantastic message. Thank you. Now, if you have been doing some art experiences where you are and you'd like us to know about it, please write to us at the Thinking Effect Podcast @gmail.com. We love hearing from teachers and understanding where you are and what your stories are. And until next time, goodbye, and I'll get Andrea to say goodbye as well.
There's goodbye to you wherever you are, and don't ever forget you are creative, you are capable yourselves too, adults and children.